Tonight what we're going to be doing, it's called Jesus 2.0. The reason why I named it that is because, whenever you've got a certain software and you upgrade it, it seems like it goes to the next version. Windows 3.1, Windows 95, Windows 98, ME, XP, Vista 7, it just keeps going up. So that's kind of what they did with Jesus, is they just kind of upgraded him. He's not really the Jesus of the Bible, and as we go through that, or through this presentation, you're going to understand this. Really what I'm doing, though, is I'm taking a back door to the resurrection. The doctrine of the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ is my absolute favorite topic with Jehovah's Witnesses. And at the end, I'm going to give you a really quick little argument that you can use for the Jehovah's Witnesses. By the way, how many of you have seen my quick questions for Jehovah's Witnesses on YouTube? Okay, that's a number of you. I've also got quick questions for Mormons. And then on my personal YouTube channel, I've got quick questions for gun control advocates, but that's a different story. I'm really into the Second Amendment after I got a death threat from a Mormon who claimed he says he was a retired Texas Ranger and also was a Danite. For those of you who know anything about Mormonism, they were the bodyguards of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, and part of their responsibilities were to silence ex-Mormons and critics of the church, and I mean silence permanently. So when this guy made that threat, I decided I was going to start exercising my Second Amendment right. So anyway, to the back door of the resurrection, Jesus 2.0. A number of years ago, Jim Bjornstad was here, and he pointed out something that I haven't forgotten. And he said that the doctrines of the Watchtower are sort of like a house of cards, or like a row of dominoes. You knock down one domino, and pretty soon they all just fall down. And he mentioned that the reason why Jehovah's Witnesses deny the doctrine of the Trinity is because of Charles Taze Russell's disbelief of the doctrine of hell. And I thought, how in the world does that work? So he said, well, think about this. If you don't believe in a hell, then the soul can't be immortal, because there's no place for the wicked to be punished. So if the soul is mortal, it ceases to exist upon death, then Jesus was not deity. He was not God, because he ceased to exist because he died. And if Jesus ceased to exist and obviously wasn't God, well, then the doctrine of the Trinity cannot be true. So you start with one doctrine and you end up with another one, and it's because they're all related. Now we're going to have some of that this evening. Before I can get into the doctrine of the resurrection, I have to tackle a number of different doctrines. And how many of you here are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses? Okay, that's probably the majority of the crowd here. So forgive me, but I'm going to ask you to put your JW thinking caps back on. And you're going to hear a lot of quotes that you're probably familiar with, but I want you to try to think, or not think, like a Jehovah's Witness when it comes to these doctrines. It's going to be sort of a review for you, and then once we get through the review, you'll start to see how this all ties together. But the terms that we're going to look at are soul, spirit, life, death, resurrection, and the biblical term life pattern. All right, so by studying these definitions, we're going to be following, or by studying the definitions and following this Watchtower logic, we're going to come to the conclusion that one of two things is true. Either the resurrected Jesus of the Watchtower really isn't the same Jesus who died, or that Jesus was resurrected in the same body in which he died. One of those two things. Either he was resurrected physically, or he's not Jesus. Okay? So, and after all of that has been accomplished, we're going to take what we've learned, and we're going to ask questions based on that information that's hopefully going to initiate the questioning process that must occur before a Jehovah's Witness can leave the Watchtower organization and come to Jesus Christ alone for salvation. So we're going to start with the doctrine of the soul. This first quote here is out of the booklet Victory Over Death. And this This is an interesting little booklet. I've got a number of quotes that I'm going to use from this. It says, the Bible's description of the human soul is found at Genesis 2:7. Jehovah God proceeded to form the man out of the dust from the ground and to blow into his nostrils the breath of life. And man came to be a living soul. Please note, man did not receive a soul, rather he came to be a living soul. Hence, man is a soul. Therefore, you do not possess a soul, but you yourself are a soul. You guys remember that as Jehovah's Witnesses? All right, so the Watchtower's definition of the soul is, a part of it is it's not, or it's mortal. It's not an immortality thing. Once you die, you cease to exist. Now, this booklet has an interesting picture about the soul. And we've got a picture of Adam here lying down in the Garden of Eden. And the little part there, the little caption underneath there says, body plus life force equals soul. So you've got two things. You need to have these two things before you can have a soul. You've got a body. You've got to have a body, either a physical or a spiritual body, as we'll see later on, plus this life force, and that's what equals this living soul. So, all right, we know what a soul is. What's this life force they keep talking about here? So we're going to go to the Insight on the Scriptures, which is kind of like their encyclopedia. You guys know this. You look at the definition spirit, and it says the spirit generally refers to the life force of the living creature or soul. So this spirit is your life force. What is that? How does that work? We're going to define that on the next page here. The Insight on the Scriptures, Volume 2, page 1025. Life force or spirit is impersonal. It's clear that the spirit or life force, as used in the sense, is impersonal. As an illustration, one might compare it to another invisible force, electricity, which may be used to make various types of machines operate, causing stoves to produce heat, fans to produce wind, computers to solve problems, television sets to produce figures, voices, and other sounds. Yet which electric current never takes on any of the characteristics of the machine in which it functions or is active. The spirit or life force that was active in man's body cells does not retain any of the characteristics of those cells, such as the brain cells and their parts in the thinking process. The personality of the dead individual is not perpetuated in the life force. That's a very key point. Or spirit that stops functioning in the deceased person's body cells. So, the spirit. Is it personal or impersonal? It's impersonal. So since the spirit has no personality, there's no thinking ability that this spirit contains. It has absolutely nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's just that which animates you. Okay? Like the electricity does to a fan or car battery or a light bulb or anything like that. It has absolutely nothing to do with your personality. Again, the Insight on the Scriptures says, so too the spirit or life force of man is not distinct from the life force in animals, as shown by Ecclesiastes 3:19 through 21, which states that they all have but one spirit. So this spirit, again, it's impersonal, doesn't have anything to do with you. It's that same thing that animates everything that's alive. People, dogs, whatever kind of animals, plants even, they all have this spirit, this life force. It's that which animates it. Terms like spirit, life force, breath of life, life principle, and active force, those are all synonymous terms. There are tons of quotes that I could give you that show basically the same idea with these different terms used. So whenever you see those terms and the context is talking about an animated living being, immediately you think impersonal, because it's just that which animates. So if animation gives life, then what's life? Let's see what the Watchtower says about life. We get this from the Reasoning from the Scriptures book. I refer to this as the Jehovah's Witness brain, this book. And when I say that, I'm not trying to be derogatory in any way. This is really how Jehovah's Witnesses are taught to think. And you know this yourselves because you've been there. Because when somebody asks you a question, if you don't know the answer, what book did you open up? Reasoning from the Scriptures. That's the book that you open up. And I love how it's worded. If the householder says this, you can say A, B, C, whatever response that you feel is going to be fitting for that particular moment. So it's telling the Jehovah's Witnesses how to think and what to believe. And that's one thing that as a Christian, when I first got saved in 88, a year later I'm in Bible college, and one of the books that I read was Know What You Believe and Why You Believe It. It's one thing to know what you believe, but you've got to know why you believe it. And a lot of times Jehovah's Witnesses don't know why they believe things. They just believe it. Had a Jehovah's Witness come to my door, this was a number of years ago, and he offered me a free home Bible study. Some of you have heard this story I've told in the past. Well, I said, hey, I'd love to have that free home Bible study with you. So he hands me a little blue book, Secret to Family Happiness. He opens it up, he shows me all the pictures and says, this is a fine publication. We can study this book. I said, well, great. Maybe we can study that book after we have that free home Bible study. So he hands me a brown book, Knowledge That Leads to Everlasting Life. He does the same thing. He opens it up, shows me the chapters, shows me the title heading at the beginning, the index, all the pictures. This is a fine publication. We can study that book. I said, well, maybe we can study this book after we study the other book, after we have that free home Bible study. And he looked at me and he says, what other book did I give you? I said, sir, do you mean to tell me that when you say free home Bible study, that you want to study a book other than the Bible? You know what his answer was? What do you have against Watchtower literature? You know what I said? What do you have against the Bible? When Paul sent his letter to the Romans, did he send along a little 32-page magazine explaining what he meant in the book of Romans? Or did he just give the Romans? This is their brain. That's why I say that, because that's what they think. So life, an active condition that distinguishes plants, animals, humans, and spirit beings, I love that term, from inanimate objects, like rocks, minerals, that kind of thing. Again, the Insight book, volume 2, page 245, says the principle of life or living, the animate existence or term of animate existence of an individual. As to earthly physical life, things possessing life generally have the capabilities of growth, metabolism, some of us don't have that anymore, response to external stimuli, and reproduction. So the contrast here is between the animate versus the inanimate objects. Inanimate objects, those things are not alive. Animate objects, they possess life. And why? Because of that life force that they have. Now again, this life force, it's the same active force in all living creatures. Now, whenever I prepare a presentation like this, I like to get some hands-on training with it. So I go to the Kingdom Hall, and I'll ask someone about questions, or about, I'll have questions about some of the literature that we look at, so I'm talking with this elder. This was not too long ago, and he says, yeah, the life force, there's nothing different. There's no distinction between any life force and any living being. And I said, really? He says, yeah. And I said, so not saying that this would ever happen, but if God were to take my life force and the life force of my dog and switch them, you're saying I wouldn't start barking, right? And he said, exactly. And I said, okay, so all right, because there's nothing personal about the life force. So if a life force comes from a dog, so what? It has nothing to do with that entity.